Today on Not Sam Wrestling, WWE has officially been sold. Is Vince McMahon back on creative? What was up with that episode of Monday Night Raw? Will AEW actually sell 90,000 tickets? And what can we expect from the WWE draft? This is Not Sam Wrestling. Welcome, everybody, to Not Sam Wrestling. If you've been paying attention, we're back in the Not Sam studio. We're also putting episodes now in totality at youtube.com/NotSamWrestling. That will last as long as it makes sense for everybody. Real quick, I wanted to say thank you again to a few people who made Wrestlemania so magical for me over the last week, as I felt like last week's podcast was monopolized by the news of Cody Rhodes losing to Roman Reigns. So thanks again, specifically to the fine folks at the Comedy Store for making Not Sam-a-Mania possible and last week's podcast possible. By the way, Not Sam-a-Mania will also be coming to youtube.com/NotSamWrestling, and to all the fine folks at Mattel for allowing me to be a part of everything that was going on with them over WrestleMania weekend and the announcement and push of the Nitro stage that you can get at MattelCreations.com. Look, as is usually the case here on Not Sam Wrestling, about, 6 hours after the podcast had been recorded last week, the entire wrestling world was once again turned on its head. The announcement was made official. Ari Emanuel and a man with a mustache claiming to be Vince McMahon showed up on CNBC and told the world that the speculation was over, that the WWE sale was all but complete, and the announcement was made that Endeavor would be buying WWE. Now, the sale, I don't think, will fully be complete until a few months down the road later this year. But for all intents and purposes, a company doesn't make an announcement like this unless it's done. They just got to cross T's, dot I's, and put everything through the SEC that we here at Wrestling Podcast don't know a thing about, so we won't even bother to speculate wildly on. But the key here is everything that we learned in terms of what Endeavor's plans are with the WWE. First of all, Vince McMahon, depending on the way you look at it, is either back or still in a firm spot with the WWE and whatever this new company is going to be. Endeavor purchased UFC. Endeavor is the owner of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and they did that a few years back. And when they purchased UFC, they purchased it for $4 million. Today, it's worth $12 million. That'd be a hell of a deal. That's like what WWE paid for WCW, $4 billion. Couple of years later, a few years later, UFC has tripled its value. It's now valued at $12 billion. Vince McMahon and Nick Khan and the whole group at WWE were able to sell World Wrestling Entertainment for $9.3 billion. It was basically exactly, reportedly, what Vince was asking for. It was more. It was over the price of what all the shares are valued at on the open market. But Endeavor said, yeah, this company is worth $9 billion. They're referring to it as UFC 2.0 in the sense that they want to do for WWE what they did for UFC, which means if Endeavor gets their $9 billion out of it, if Endeavor does what they think they can do with WWE, then a few years from now, we could be looking at a $20 to $30 billion company in WWE, which is insane to think about. In 1982, Vince McMahon buys this company from his father for $1 million. We now go 41 years later, and he sells it for $9.3 billion with the intention of another company getting even more money out of it. It is insane. So Endeavor, what they're going to do is form a new company, right, where they're going to take UFC and WWE and make them one company. Two separate brands that will apparently exist completely separate from one another, but under the same company, with UFC's $12 billion value and WWE's $9 billion value, you're looking at a $21 billion company is what they want to grow. And I'm sure that that is what they're going to try to build on in terms of value. Ari Emanuel, the CEO of Endeavor, is going to be the CEO of this new company that is going unnamed. But on the stock market, I think the symbol is going to be TKO, which is great. Interestingly here, this is what was really interesting to me. Vince McMahon is going to be executive chairman of the new company, whatever the company's called. But WWE and UFC together as one company. Vince McMahon's going to be the executive chairman of that company. And then one step down the ladder, if you look at it in terms of a graphic, Nick Khan is going to remain the president of the WWE. Dana White is going to remain the president of UFC. It's just very interesting the way this company is mapped out, that Dana White and Nick Khan are on the same level, and Vince McMahon, from a company standpoint, ranks above Dana White. Now, will Vince McMahon have any say in what they do in the UFC? I would imagine not, especially not at first. I mean, it is Vince, so who knows? You can't really predict anything. But I would imagine, especially at first, you won't see interference going on. I think that it's a good thing. I mean, if you go in terms of somebody buying the company, if somebody's going to buy WWE as fans of the WWE, there aren't that many people or companies or groups that on paper could service the industry properly better than Endeavor. If you go back when this conversation first started, there were really, I think, two companies that I was thinking would make a lot of sense. One was Endeavor and the other was Disney. Because when you look at WWE, you have to consider like what the business is. It's been really interesting listening to people talk about it and give their opinions on it, because it's such a varied business that depending on where your kind of brain goes, that's what you that's the bucket that you put WWE in. But WWE doesn't just fit in one of those buckets. Like a lot of people go like, well, you know, maybe NBC or Fox is going to buy it because they already have the TV. And it's like, yeah, if WWE was a TV company only, that would make sense. Well, maybe this company's going to buy it for the live events. Well, if WWE was just a live event company, that would make sense. But I think you have to look at companies that know how to execute on television rights, on mega live events, and on IP, intellectual property. Because those are the three, I think. And then I guess the fourth pillar, merchandising, right? Merchandising, intellectual property, live events, and television rights / streaming rights, but it would all work, you know, in the same category, are kind of what the WWE is. I think that, I mean, they're crushing it right now when it comes to live events. They just put 160,000 people into SoFi Stadium. I don't know if you heard about that last week. But I think the real play is going to be in that intellectual property. And what they can do in intellectual property are all the pay-per-view names and, more importantly, characters that they still own the rights to. Keep in mind that when they bought WCW, they bought a bunch of rings and they bought intellectual property. I think that WWE has gotten 100 times what they paid for WCW just based on the NWO logo alone. I don't know what that translates into. I mean, for me, that's why I was looking at Disney. I was like, you know, there's so much room to put like an Undertaker's haunted house in a theme park, you know, whatever it is, a Stone Cold beer garden, you know, Hulk Hogan's Red, White, and Blue Tour of America that's like Soarin' at Epcot, except it's Hogan showing you all the great American landmarks. Maybe you jump on the Lex Express and it's an out-of-control bus ride. There's so many things. I would love it if of all the IP, they were like, how are we not taking advantage of this Lex Express? Do we still own the Lex Express? Of course we need it. But that's going to be something, you know, and I think Endeavor, through their work with the UFC, has proven how far they can take it. They've done amazing things with the UFC through TV rights. The pay-per-view numbers that UFC does are incredible, and you wonder if that's going to happen with WWE, when you've got UFC, who their model is that they, like WWE, are native to a streaming app, right? WWE's got Peacock. UFC is native to ESPN+, but to get a UFC pay-per-view, not only do you have to subscribe to ESPN+, but you also then have to pay $80 to get the pay-per-view. It's kind of like the way AEW does it with Bleacher Report. Like, you have to have a Bleacher Report account, but you're paying per pay-per-view. I would not be surprised if after the Peacock deal, WWE goes back to that, especially the way they've been amping up their live events. The idea that WrestleMania, mega show. Then you got WrestleMania Backlash, which there have been years where Backlash was a complete throwaway, but this year, going to Puerto Rico, looking at the way the card is already possibly shaping up, that's going to be a huge event. Then you've got a Saudi show, which is, all the Saudi shows are mega shows. Then you've got Money in the Bank in the UK, which is going to be a mega show. Then you've got SummerSlam in Detroit, which is going to be in a stadium, another mega show. So if they're focusing less on doing a lot of arena pay-per-views and more making their premium live events mega shows, then I could easily see them trying to find that way monetarily to get ahead of the game. But there's a lot of ways I could see it. There are people, in one article I read, they talked about trying to really utilize the IP, because Endeavor is obviously also a big Hollywood company. They know the entertainment space very well. Is there a version of this where they take their IP and, there's an Undertaker movie where it's not Mark Calloway, who's now an actor? Because this is what they've tried before. It's like, it's one thing to try to take your wrestlers and turn them into actors. It's another thing to take those characters that you create and make cinematic universes revolving around them. It's like when Marvel went in, it's like, okay, how do we take this Ant-Man and make an entire... How do you take Doctor Strange and make 2 standalone movies around Doctor Strange? Well, if we build out this whole world, we get people into Doctor Strange, and this is going to be really interesting, because in the world of wrestling and in the world of WWE for forever, the separation of the performer and the character has always been a very blurred line. It's one of the most interesting forms of entertainment, because that suspension of disbelief, it doesn't work unless you can sit in a stadium and watch Cody Rhodes walk to the ring, and in that moment, allow yourself to truly believe that he is on a quest to defeat Roman Reigns. We all know what we're watching. We all know it's entertainment. We all know the results have been predetermined. We all know there's a cooperation going on here, but we need to take that in order to get the most out of it and give the most to it. That needs to be taken out, and that's easier to do in a movie theater when you're contained to this 3 hours, right? Even on a television show. It's easier to say, okay, from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Sunday nights on AMC, I can believe that Bryan Cranston is actually Walter White. The art of wrestling, to borrow a term from one Colt Cabana, is to make people believe that Bryan Cranston is, on some level, always Walter White. That if you see Bryan Cranston in an airport, you think that he's Walter White, and you approach him with 58 objects to sign. If you listen to Bryan Cranston give an interview or give a speech in front of people, you think it's Walter White talking to you. And if he starts talking as if he's actually a physics teacher turned meth cook, that you're not sitting there going, what's this guy, crazy? You're going like, oh, yeah, no, I get what we're watching. I like this. That is what makes WWE IP so much different than any other IP in entertainment. So, will you be able... The other trick is going to be translating stories told on a wrestling show to non-wrestling fans, right? When you have Marvel and comic book movies, the reason they make so much money is because a lot of people go see them that have never read a comic book and never will read a comic book. They just like the movies. So can we make people care about the Nation of Domination without ever watching wrestling? If you can figure out how to do that, you've got a multi-million, if not billion-dollar revenue stream that nobody has quite yet figured out how to open. But it's going to be really interesting. I think with this sale, what we get is that over the next several years, sports entertainment, professional wrestling as we know it, is going to evolve. It's going to take a step forward. It's going to take a step forward, a big step forward into legitimacy. And I use that term with a grain of salt because obviously I consider this to be a legitimate art form. Everybody watching or listening to this podcast considers it to be a legitimate art form, but outsiders, normies, if you will, don't. And I look down upon them for it and think they're dumber for it. But regardless, they don't. So I think it's going to be Endeavor's mission to kind of change that. The same way they had to change the perception that UFC was this like savage blood sport and make it so that the public perception was more that, no, this is a legitimate sport. The object isn't going to be to make WWE seem like a legitimate sport. The object is going to be to make WWE seem like a legitimate entertainment form the same way UFC is a legitimate sport, if any of that makes sense. I think one of the really big things to come out of the sale announcement was that Vince, with his mustache, looking like Walt Disney, Clark Gable, Raul Julia sat down with Ari Emanuel on CNBC, and they asked him point blank, are you going to be back in creative control? And Vince said, well, it's complicated. And you're like, oh, boy, here we go. Well, yes and no. Monday morning, Vince says, well, yes and no. And by Monday night, the sky is falling because people see an episode of Raw, and it's the Raw after WrestleMania, which has historically, more often than not, been one of the better episodes of Monday Night Raw all year long. And they see a strikingly typical Monday Night Raw show. There's one return, which is okay, kind of one that everybody was like, eventually they'll be back, and one big angle. And other than that, it's business as usual. And then the rumors start flying. Dave Meltzer starts reporting. Vince McMahon was completely hands-on with Monday Night Raw this week. And people go, no. Hey now, the dream is over. They worry. They worry that Triple H has lost his power. We put our trust in Hunter Hearst Helmsley, we trust. And then there's pictures going around on the internet of scripts being passed out at the last minute. Now, first of all, I don't believe that scripts ever stopped getting passed out at the last minute. That's just the way business is done. There's a lot of stuff is getting produced at the same time. But I do wonder about what's going on behind the scenes and the creative control of the company, of course. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that was one of the better Raw after WrestleManias. The opening promo was fun. Brock, Cody, Roman, Solo. That was a big moment. The ending was like, oh, okay, now we're doing something. Which we'll talk about in a minute because there was also some like, I don't know if this is the right move-ishness to it. But the middle was kind of just, well, it was just Raw. You know, a lot of people coming off WrestleMania, they were wondering if the reason that Roman Reigns won because of the Endeavor deal. Endeavor wanted Roman Reigns to be champion, which if you're even considering that for a moment, I don't know, obviously. I'm not part of these discussions, but I cannot fathom that anybody at Endeavor in a high-ranking position, we're talking billion-dollar deals going on, are watching Monday Night Raw going, I want this guy to win. I want that guy to win. It's not happening. It's also not a shock to me that Endeavor would want Vince McMahon in control of WWE. If you look at the way they handled UFC, they kept Dana White there, and they made him the guy because they said, Dana, you know how to run this business. We're going to tell you what we want. We're going to utilize the business to the best of our potentials. But in terms of the day-to-day, you know how to run it, and you know what your fans want. I think they look at WWE the same way, and they go, look, good or bad, there's one guy, long-term, not like, I don't know, the last 6 months of Raw weren't that good. Long-term, there's one guy who took WWE from being a $1 million company to a $9 billion company. There's one guy, historically, who has figured out how to long-term maintain a wrestling company as a multi-billion-dollar entertainment body. And that's Vince McMahon. Nobody else has done that. So the idea that if I'm paying $9 billion for a wrestling company and my intention is to make it a $30 billion company, I want to put a guy in charge that definitely knows how to grow a wrestling company in ways that nobody would ever think possible. So that's Vince McMahon, you know. And I don't think it goes much deeper than that. Now, if we want to put on some tinfoil hats and go, okay, well, there has to be more reason than just we're telling a story that Roman Reigns beat Cody Rhodes. If that were the case, I'm not saying it is, but if it were, I would say one thing that struck me was a few weeks back, there was a conversation about WWE wanting to get involved with gambling, right? Wanting states that allow, you know, certain non-sports events to be gambled upon, to have WWE be a part of that. And they said, you know, we'll make it so that only a very, 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 very few people know the results, like one or two. We'll lock it in a safe or an envelope. We'll do whatever the Academy Awards do, where they said the Academy Awards, you can gamble in certain states on the Academy Awards. That's because there's only a couple of people who know. The results are predetermined and locked up way ahead of time, and they can't change it based on odds. If you look at the gambling odds going into WrestleMania, they were highly in favor of Cody winning the title. Is it possible that the WWE said, hey, I mean, look at WrestleMania. The gambling odds were all on the side of Cody Rhodes, because people would be concerned, right? If the odds are going to dictate who's going to win every time, nobody can ever, you know, the house can never win, they're not going to want to legalize this thing. But if they go, look, the odds were on Cody, and we had Roman winning this, and this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. I'm just saying it could be part of it. You don't know. But I definitely also don't think that Vince McMahon showed up the day of WrestleMania and decided, well, Roman's going to win because he's my guy, right? Vince McMahon's the one that signed Cody Rhodes. Vince McMahon's the one that put Cody Rhodes on the pedestal that he put him on at WrestleMania 38. Vince McMahon is the one that has put Cody Rhodes on the path, right? Vince McMahon is the one that had Cody Rhodes beating Seth Rollins 3 times in a row. Vince McMahon was in charge up until Cody Rhodes won the Hell in a Cell match and had to go away. The question was, once Cody came back in January and somebody new was in charge, would he get treated the same way? And he did. But the idea that Vince would come back and all of a sudden not believe in Cody Rhodes, I don't think I don't think there's any evidence that would support that. I don't know why anybody would think that. So when you look at Raw, you know, I mean, you had almost beating Elias, which I feel like Elias is like a low-key Raw after WrestleMania MVP. He's always, I was thinking about last year, the big moment was Ezekiel coming back or debuting in WWE. But yeah, Elias was there. I mean, the Bad Bunny thing where he knocked out Dominic and then Damian Priest chokeslammed him through a table, which I guess they're setting something up. But the Riddle return. But I think what really struck me, right? Because I didn't So I'll talk about the bookends in a minute. I thought that the Seth appearance felt very Vince McMahon to me. Seth Rollins doing the backstage promo saying the party's out there and just coming to the ring and having the audience sing for him, right? After they sang for him at WrestleMania with the conductor and everything. Just going to the ring, having the audience sing for him, and then leaving. That felt very Vince McMahon to me. I feel like, and I'm just as somebody who watches this stuff with a keen eye, I feel like Triple H is more apt to do traditional storytelling, where Triple H would have started some kind of angle. I think Vince obviously loves angles, but he also will just get a character over. He'll just do something for a character. He's not even thinking about what's next. It's just like, let's have Rollins go out there and just have everybody sing for him so everybody can see how into this thing everybody is for Rollins. And just put Rollins over, and then that's it. Because I'm sure everybody was sitting there waiting for something to happen, and then nothing happened. That feels more like a Vince thing. I might be looking too deep into it, though. That moment felt very Vincey to me. Triple H came out. He just kind of talked about how great WWE was and how they had a very great weekend. Okay. And then the big opening segment with Brock coming to Cody's aid to challenge Roman and Solo in the main event. Now, that's the other thing. The fact that the main event didn't actually happen feels a little more Vince than Triple H to me. You know, Triple H would usually have the turn happen maybe later in the match, so at least we get a little bit of the match. Vince's move is more to just say something's going to happen and then something completely different happens, right? Just to throw everybody off. That felt more Vincey to me. But what we saw was this promo happened. It seemed great. Brock had his arm around Cody. He was really chummy. In hindsight, suspiciously chummy. To the point that I tweeted out right as that promo was happening, I'm loving this promo, but I can't wait to see Brock Lesnar versus Cody Rhodes. To me, it was the only place that you were going to go with this thing. And I mean, a big part of that was because I'm going, Cody's not going to immediately fight Roman Reigns again. So how do you keep him way up there? Going into WrestleMania, I said the reason that Brock Lesnar is fighting Omos is because what else is he going to do? If he's not going to wrestle for the title and he's not going to turn heel, he's just going to go out there and beat up a villain, right? So who you could have him beat up LA Knight if you want. You could have him beat up whoever. So in the meantime, let's do a spectacle. Let's have him F5, a giant 8-foot guy, 7'4", whatever. That's all. Anything taller than 6'6" is 8 feet to me. And so by that same token, I'm sitting there going like, okay, I'm looking at Brock and Cody in the ring, and I'm going, well, if we're not going to go straight to Cody versus Roman, Cody still needs a mega opponent. And I had said after WrestleMania, maybe Austin Theory is that guy, and Cody goes on a run as the United States champion, which I'm still not against. But I'm looking at him and Brock, and I go, oh, that's something I didn't consider. Especially because, as I said, Brock doesn't have really any place to go either, right? And so we get to the main event, and as ring announcements are being made, Brock Lesnar attacks Cody Rhodes, and Roman and Solo leave. Roman goes, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. And Brock Lesnar just beats the dog urine out of Cody Rhodes. Just completely obliterates this guy. Smash, smash, smash. Beats him across a table. Beats him across a set of stairs. Beats him all over the ring. Beats him on the outside of the ring. Wherever Brock Lesnar can beat up Cody Rhodes, he beats the stuffing out of the American Nightmare. So after losing at WrestleMania to Roman Reigns, Cody shows up on Raw and is just limb from limb dismantled by the beast, Brock Lesnar. I would imagine this is where we're going in Puerto Rico. But I wouldn't have minded a little bit of runway on this. You know, I think that I still am not one of these like, oh, Cody Rhodes lost to Roman Reigns, and this means that I'm never watching WWE again, people. But I also acknowledge that we spent a long time with Cody really building a great fan base for himself and just creating all this support. And you can't stop cashing that in. Totally. I still believe that he needs to fight from underneath a little bit, but we can't do a full role reversal either. As I was watching Raw, I thought this would be very, very frustrating to a Cody Rhodes fan. And I think in wrestling, what you want is to feel like there are obstacles against your favorite that your favorite is going to be able to overcome. Not, I'm just going to buy a ticket and they're going to beat up my favorite so that I get sad. And I feel like if you're a Cody fan, just coming off WrestleMania, you got sad watching Brock just smash his face in for a solid 10, right? 10 straight minutes of watching your favorite get bludgeoned is a lot to ask of anyone. I think that maybe it wouldn't have been the worst thing if you had actually had the match. You know, I feel like, and again, it's very Vince-ish, but I feel like the move could have been like, I feel like Cody needs stumbling blocks, but he doesn't need a mountain put in front of him every step of the way, right? He needs to, stumble back, fell back. I like the idea of going to Backlash with Roman and with Cody and Brock as a team. Like, spend the next several weeks with Cody and Brock on the same page. Do the match, and maybe you have the Bloodline retreat. Maybe you have Roman pull Solo down so that you don't have to pin either one of them, and Roman and Solo lose by countout. And so Cody and Brock as a team hold their hands up in the air together, and that's how you end the Raw after WrestleMania, with two just monster baby faces, because people love cheering Brock Lesnar. And then maybe the next week on Raw, Brock isn't there, but Cody does a promo or wrestles somebody and wins. And then the next week on Raw, Cody and Brock do a promo, and they set something up for WrestleMania Backlash, whether it's a match against the Usos, whether it's a match against preferably Roman and Solo. Maybe you do Roman and Solo versus Brock and Cody with no countout. There is no countout. There is no escape. I don't want to do it in a cage. That'll complicate things. But just no countout. One fall to a finish. Maybe no holds barred or something like that, right? You do no holds barred. That way, the Bloodline can play up their advantage. We have strength in numbers. And Cody says, I don't need your numbers. I have a beast in my corner. Brock Lesnar is here. And then at the pay-per-view is where Brock Lesnar turns on Cody. And then we can go forward from there with Cody versus Brock, right? I think that it probably would have been a good move coming off of WrestleMania to let Cody have a win and then take that away from him later. So you're spacing out these traumatic Cody beatings, because we just were traumatized on Sunday. To get traumatized again on Monday is a lot to ask of anybody. And I think that that's why, when you have a fan base that's sitting there going, well, the Raw after WrestleMania is the most exciting Raw of the year, and it wasn't, right? It was not I didn't think, as far as Raw goes, it wasn't a bad episode. There was stuff that happened on it, but it was a fairly typical episode of Raw. So the idea that you didn't have any mega surprises, and then you still left with another feeling of watching your favorite good guy get beat, it's not a shock that people left kind of dismayed on Monday. I think that NXT was actually really, really good, right? And, in terms of setting stuff up going forward and everything. And I think SmackDown felt a little bit more like what we've been used to in the last few months, starting with a great wrestling match, and then telling us a story that was arced throughout the episode with Jey Uso and Sami Zayn and the tension in the bloodline and Paul Heyman telling Solo that either Jey takes out the Sami problem or you take out our problem, which I think is foreshadowing the idea that Sami isn't the problem, Jey is the problem. I think that is where we'll go. I think that the next opponent for Roman is probably going to be Jey Uso, right? I think that we're looking at probably Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, and Riddle versus Solo and the Usos at WrestleMania Backlash. And that'll put a bow, I think, on the Sami, Kevin Owens part of the story. And it'll be where we start to tell the story of either the Usos turning or Jey Uso turning. Hopefully it's both Usos turning. I don't ever really want to see Jimmy and Jey on opposite sides of the fence. But either way, it could get interesting. I think there were two really interesting parts of SmackDown beyond that. Number one was Dominic Mysterio. Dominic Mysterio, save for the tippity top guys, save for Roman, Cody, and Brock, somehow Dominic Mysterio has become the most over performer in WWE. Dominic Mysterio was not able to get a word out on the SmackDown after WrestleMania, and he didn't have to insult the hometown sports team. He didn't have to tell the audience that they were dumb or ugly. He didn't even utter the phrase, "you people." None of it. He didn't have to say, "you see." He just had to exist. Just Dominic being Dominic, even coming off of a loss. It's not like they were booing him because Dominic was able to beat their favorite at WrestleMania. Dominic lost at WrestleMania and still comes out a bigger star than when he walked in. This was like, I mean, it wasn't quite on the level, but the last time that there were boos like this was when Roman Reigns beat The Undertaker and he showed up on Raw and he couldn't get a word out. Dominic could have milked those boos even more because they kept growing. The more he talked, the more they booed. They've hit gold with this Dominic Mysterio. Don't change a thing. It seems like they're going to do Dominic and Priest versus Rey and Bad Bunny at WrestleMania Backlash in Puerto Rico, which personally, I don't think they should. Only because they've already, I think, sold out the arena. If they haven't, I don't think they have many tickets left to sell. I think that that's one of those things, especially in Puerto Rico, that's going to move the needle. That's going to get revenue up, unless you're moving into a stadium. Because people will show up to see Bad Bunny wrestle. That match, especially with Dominic, the hottest heel in the company. I mean, it's almost inevitable. Like, Dominic versus Bad Bunny is going to be the match. You're going to... SummerSlam, pencil it in. Dominic Mysterio versus Bad Bunny. And then, I mean, if this keeps going, I don't know where you stop. I don't know where it ends. Maybe there isn't an end. Is Dominic Mysterio going to end up as a world champion contender? I think he is. You can't ignore that kind of heat. You can't ignore those boos. And it's not even quote-unquote go-away heat, which is still debatable as to whether or not that exists or not. It's real, like, I'm booing the bad guy. WWE, they got to be careful. They've captured themselves in this amazing position where Cody Rhodes as a good guy is getting cheered and Dominic Mysterio as a bad guy is getting booed. A few years ago on this podcast, "boo the bad guys" was our catchphrase because nobody did it. Because stories were not being told effectively on WWE TV, and you had all the good guys getting booed and all the bad guys getting cheered, and there was just this non-communication happening between the audience and the show, so that if you watched it, it was a total mess. because you're sitting there going, I don't understand what the story I'm being told is, because this guy is clearly the good guy, but everybody's booing him, and this guy's clearly the villain, and everybody's cheering him. Now, the fans are right in line, dude. It's amazing. It's been a long time since we've seen it on this level. Even that one that I brought up with Roman showing up to Raw and getting booed out of the building, he was a good guy. He was a good guy when that happened. Dominic's a bad guy and he's getting booed. What is this, Hulkamania? What is this, 1988? What an incredible time to be alive. You better hold on to this tight. I mean, that Judgment Day faction between Rhea Ripley and Dominic Mysterio is printing money. Money, money, money. And then, of course, the big overarching news from SmackDown was that the draft is back. Triple H announced that the draft is coming back, and it'll be back in a few weeks, and it will be the biggest draft ever, industry shaping, with every superstar being draft eligible. Now, the way he said that, and people said, well, what's different about it than any other draft? The way he said that, it sounds like, I mean, when you say every superstar is eligible, that would include NXT this year. And I would think that that would mean like guys like Brock, Roman, all those people that are competing regularly should technically be eligible. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't draft Brock still. But it would, conceivably, it would mean that everybody's eligible. If I were to guess, I would have to imagine that the draft is going to be on May 8th, which is a Monday. So May 8th, and then what? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So 9, 10, 11, 12. I would think that the draft is going to go on May 8th and May 12th on Raw and SmackDown. And the reason that I think that is because you got WrestleMania Backlash on May 6th, where I think you're going to get Brock versus Cody. You're going to get Riddle, Kevin Owens, and Sammy versus the Usos and Solo. And you're going to get Rey and Bad Bunny versus Priest and Dominic. So, Damian Priest and Dominic Mysterio. So, the fact that it is WrestleMania Backlash, the fact that those stories are already being told, it's only going to get totally confusing if you do a draft within the next 2 weeks and then you have a pay-per-view immediately after that, because these superstars won't be on the same shows anymore, and you'll already know that. And the other matches will be stories that have had 1 week to heat up. And if you're looking at this, like if you got Brock versus Cody, and after this match Brock is on Raw and Cody's on SmackDown. If you got Riddle, KO, and Sammy, and 2 of those guys are on SmackDown and 1 of them's on Raw, you know that the result's not going to matter. And you can't do that, right? You can't. It makes for an ineffective storytelling. So I have to imagine, and then you don't want to waste any time after that pay-per-view. You want to do the draft right away so we can start telling stories before the next pay-per-view. So I would have to imagine that right after WrestleMania Backlash is when the draft is going to happen. Now, I do think NXT is going to be involved, and I hope they do it like they did it when, I think it was when SmackDown first went live, when they had like cameras in all the locker rooms of each of the 3 brands, so that like the NXT stars were watching the draft in Orlando and we saw them. I think that's when like Alexa Bliss got drafted, maybe even Carmella. I don't know. It was cool though. It was cool. I think that I think they should at least attempt, and they have in the past, but they should attempt to make the draft meaningful again, to put some stakes on this, to make it so that people have a preference of where they go, to make it seem as though people are actually being separated, that they won't be able to float from brand to brand, at least instantly. Who knows 6 months from now where we'll be. But right now, I need to believe, in order to care about the draft, that they're going to stick to their brands. And I hope that that's the way they do it. Now, I have to believe this is the opportunity to split titles. If you really want to shake things up, it could be very interesting to draft Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn on 2 separate shows so that they split that tag team up and then each one of them takes the titles and finds a new partner. I think that that's possible. It's also possible that, you know, a team like the Street Profits is able to, you know, get one set of tag titles while Kevin Owens and Sami take the other ones. But I think the more interesting one is going to be the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. Now, clearly at this point, Roman's record is extremely important, right? We're definitely going to hit 1,000 days. If you ask me, as I said last week, we're going for the Bruno Sammartino 12 years. I think somebody did the math, and it's like we have to get to Backlash, I don't know, 2028 or something like that. Whatever we have to do. 4 or 5 years away from hitting the first Bruno Sammartino record. And I think we can do it if we put our minds to it. But that Universal title is that's the title that he won in 2020. That's what the record is, right? The undisputed WWE Universal Championship are both titles, and both titles he's only held for a year. I think that the Universal title is still looked at as the top prize in the game, as I think it was before. And that maybe it's time to put the WWE Championship back into play. One way to do that, by the way, would be to put it on the line for the King of the Ring tournament. We've got King of the Ring returning, I think it's in June. I think in Saudi Arabia. And I think that you know, if for the first time ever in 1992, the WWE Championship was on the line for the first time ever in the Royal Rumble. The title was vacated. Now, the WWE Championship has been on the line in Royal Rumble since then, but that's the only time it was ever vacated, and the winner of the Rumble becomes the champion. I think if you vacate the WWE Championship, let Roman keep the Universal title, and then you just deck out, you put like the King of the Ring now includes Brock Lesnar, Cody Rhodes, Edge. You know, I mean, everybody, every main event guy is a part of this, and it's the most loaded King of the Ring tournament. You do 8. You don't do 4. You do 8. 8 men, one night, the winner's the WWE champion. I think you got a lot of eyeballs on King of the Ring. There are other ways to do it. I'm willing to listen to a lot of ways, but I think putting that on the line during the King of the Ring would be a good way to go. Now, I also, as I'm thinking about the future and future pay-per-views, one thing I just can't get out of my head is that, like, this is what we've got coming up. We've got WrestleMania Backlash, Draft. I mean, the world of WWE is going to look completely different. WrestleMania Backlash, Draft, hypothetically splitting the titles, King of the Ring, and then right after King of the Ring, you go to the UK for Money in the Bank. Now, the question is, who wins Money in the Bank this year? And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but to me, there's one person who I believe now more strongly than ever should win the Money in the Bank briefcase this year. And it ain't Cody Rhodes. I think Cody Rhodes is beyond Money in the Bank. I think the idea that Cody Rhodes needs the Money in the Bank briefcase to find his way back to the WWE Championship right now as I talk to you is unnecessary. You know, I think the idea is that Cody just simply climbs up that mountain and works hard to get back into the title hunt. I think that this year at Money in the Bank, the person who needs to win that briefcase is a person who I think will bring all that chatter back to the briefcase, especially if one of the titles is off Roman. If you have the WWE Championship off Roman, now somebody can actually lose. Now, the Money in the Bank winner, you're actually looking at going, oh my God, I think they may actually end up being WWE champion. That person is somebody who I think can put on a really good performance in a ladder match, even though he's never been in a ladder match. And somebody that I think can take all the potential villainy of being the Money in the Bank briefcase holder and take it up a notch. This is a man who, while holding the briefcase, would have the WWE held hostage because the idea of him being WWE champion is so antithetical to what the WWE universe wants that they can't see it, but they know it's probably going to happen. In 2023, the person who should hold the Money in the Bank briefcase is Logan Paul. Logan Paul is in this position now where he's had big matches. He's proven what he can do. Beat The Miz, did the tag match, has shocked the world. Even people that don't like Logan Paul go, man, I don't like that guy, but he's real, real good. All that said, he's now lost to Roman Reigns. He got the opportunity at Roman Reigns. He pushed Roman further than he ever should have been able to push Roman, but Roman won. He had his match with Seth Rollins, the great good guy versus bad guy match at WrestleMania, and Seth Rollins beat him. So now he's had a world title match. He's had a big WrestleMania grudge match. He's lost them both. How do you now rebuild the stock of a Logan Paul? You can't just have Logan Paul go out there and go like, okay, well, you know, I'm going to beat whatever lesser card guy. It doesn't cut it anymore. Logan Paul has to operate at a top level in order to be worth the investment that's being made in Logan Paul. So how do you operate up there? You have him go to this pay-per-view and win the Money in the Bank briefcase. And now every WWE title match that you have, regardless of who the champion ends up being, after potentially King of the Ring in my mind, you're thinking, what if Logan Paul comes out here? Because you also know that the WWE would love the media attention of Logan Paul winning the WWE Championship, the fact that it would be on the front page of every newspaper, the fact that it would be a YouTube trending topic, the fact that it would be everywhere. WWE Champion Logan Paul, that's right up their alley. Every impulsive podcast, Logan's got his Money in the Bank briefcase behind him. Once Logan Paul becomes Mr. Money in the Bank, he's not a WWE superstar 4 times a year when he shows up on TV. As long as Logan Paul is holding that Money in the Bank briefcase, he's an active WWE superstar. And no matter what he does, on some level, he's promoting WWE. I cannot see on any level how Logan Paul is not the absolute ideal pick to be Mr. Money in the Bank this year. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. Now, AEW had a big show this week. AEW had their own Dynamite after WrestleMania. AEW had a big Dynamite this week. So coming off of Dynamite, you have FTR sticking around with AEW, right? That's confirmed. There was a lot of speculation wildly running rampant. But FTR goes in. I mean, the Gun Club coming out to Many Men was one of the great entrances. Many men wish death upon me. Oh, it's a big deal. That shadow that they had around him was a great entrance. But FTR comes in. If they don't win the tag team championship, they lose their AEW career. They walked in there and they won the AEW tag team championship. So big news in the sense that FTR is the tag team champions. Bigger news in the sense that we now know for sure FTR is sticking around. The other big thing to come out of Dynamite this week, for sure, was Jay White. Jay White, who, again, we talk about wildly speculating. It was wildly speculated that Jay White would potentially be coming to WWE and that WWE was interested in Jay White. Well, as absolute Ricky Starks makes his way to the ring, Jay White is right there to stop the party. Jumps him. Juice Robinson is with him. They Bullet Club Too Sweet each other, and the Bullet Club is now in AEW. Jay White is All Elite. I personally think that AEW could have handled the Jay White debut better. I think that if it were me, I'd go, look, whether it's true or not, The internet is under the assumption, wrestling fans are under the assumption that WWE was making overtures toward Jay White. I think that we need to show the world that he chose AEW for a reason. You know, the same way that part of the Cody Rhodes thing that makes it so interesting is this is a guy who chose to leave AEW and come back to WWE. Look how successful he is. I think that you want to send a message to the world that if you choose to show up in AEW, it's going to be the right move for your career. Jay White is a guy who I think has it all. I'm a big Jay White fan. I was hoping he would show up in WWE, to tell you the truth. If it were me, I'd want to take full advantage of my investment. And I think I would have done that MJF segment last. And instead of having the Pillars beat him up, I would have Jay White come out and attack MJF. I would have Jay White immediately put himself in the main event scene and declare that he had showed up to AEW in an effort to take the world championship away from MJF. And that's when the Pillars can come out, because I'm acknowledging that we're right in the middle of a storyline, right? That's when Sammy Guevara and Darby Allin and Jungle Boy, they can all come out and go like, what makes you think you can just cut the line? And you know how like MJF loves storylines where he makes it so that guys have to wrestle multiple matches before they can wrestle him? Well, we can do a storyline with this where it's not MJF's doing. So we're not recycling that storyline. But in the build-up to whenever the next pay-per-view is, you know, over the course of the next few Dynamites, we do Jay White versus Jungle Boy, Jay White versus Sammy Guevara, Jay White versus Darby Allin. And maybe you do a thing where, like, he's able to beat Sammy, he's able to beat Darby, but he and Jungle Boy go to, like, a time limit draw, and they still decide to give Jay White the title shot. And it makes people think, oh, I wonder if Jay White's going to win the title, and then Jungle Boy is going to be first contender. Something like that. But I think that you have Jay White come in and have those matches with some of the AEW homegrown guys building up to MJF versus Jay White. And I think you could build Jay White up to be a pretty big star by the time you get to the next pay-per-view if you do it that way. That's not what AEW decided to do, but that's what I would have decided to do. They did say Tony Khan was going to make a huge announcement on AEW this week, and I believe it was a huge announcement. Some people tried to poo-poo the announcement. I don't agree with that. I think it's an insane announcement. AEW is doing their first show in the UK. I think it's their first show overseas. And, I mean, I know they've done Canada, but there is no sea between the United States and Canada. It's one body of land. It's North America. But they're playing Wembley Stadium in England. This is the stadium, not arena, stadium, in which they did SummerSlam 92. And it's been renovated since then. It has even more seats. I think that I know SummerSlam 92, they put about 80,000 people into the building. I think now it's capable of doing 90,000. They're also calling the show All In, which I think is very, very fitting because, and when Tony announced it, he did give Cody Rhodes the shout out. He said Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks came together for All In. And the reason All In existed is, you know, the roots of it, the origin story of it, is that Dave Meltzer said that they could not do a 10,000 seat arena. And Cody said, I'll take that bet. And that's the origin story of All In. So now, how do you follow that up? Well, you have the world saying, how do you expect to do 90,000 people? Probably do $90,000 easy, but 90,000 people in Wembley Stadium. And Tony Khan is saying, I'll take that bet. This is All In 2. It's scheduled to take place a week before All Out. All Out hasn't been officially announced, but All Out is a marquee AEW tradition. Every Labor Day weekend in Chicago, they do All Out. So the question, people have a lot of questions. Number one, and nobody's really discussed this, is do AEW really expect to put 90,000 people in the stadium, or are they going to tear it down a little bit, right? Like when NXT announces that they're going to be in an arena, when they go, yeah, we're going to play the crypto arena, they're not planning on selling out the arena. They're planning on configuring the arena to whatever it is, 5,000 or 6,000 seats. So are they actually attempting to sell out Wembley Stadium, or are they going to configure it to 50,000 seats, which is still a ton of seats, by the way. But I'm sure you could configure it to 50,000, and 50,000 is a lot of seats. Still be the biggest AEW show ever, but it wouldn't. I'm not sure if it would be the biggest, but it wouldn't be 90. That's for sure. It's the first time in the market. Also, is this going to be a pay-per-view? And if it is a pay-per-view, are you doing pay-per-views one week after another? Are All In and All Out both going to be pay-per-views? Is this going to be part of AEW's storyline? Or is it going to be like All In was, where it's just this big, massive, giant super show? Maybe you're going to bring in big talent specifically just for All In. And that's it, just to get the stadium rocking. I mean, personally, I've got to believe CM Punk is going to wrestle in the UK. I have to believe if they're planning on putting anywhere near 90,000 people in that building, CM Punk is where you start. If I had to guess right now, I would think that's the plan, that the main event of All In is CM Punk versus somebody else. You go a lot of different directions. You could do CM Punk versus MJF will be a pretty massive main event. If you can pull off CM Punk versus Kenny Omega, I mean, that would be insane. I doubt that you could at this point. They may not be able to actually pull that off. But I think just having CM Punk back, that's his first match back. And I mean, it's almost like you may want to, if you're trying to get 90,000 in there, you may want to try to mimic the success of The First Dance, where CM Punk is not on TV at all, leading to All In. And you have MJF or Kenny or whoever it is versus a mystery opponent, and you allow people to know that it's CM Punk. You don't announce it on television, but it becomes pretty clear. Yeah, CM Punk is who it's going to be. And people show up because they don't believe it. And then Cult of Personality kicks in, and you get that. That's probably how I would play it, honestly. I'd at least consider it. Get CM Punk back. Don't officially announce he's going to wrestle in the main event, but make the main event a mystery opponent and make it pretty clear that if it's not CM Punk, it would be embarrassing. Because then it'll be CM Punk, because AEW is not going to go out here and embarrass himself. I think that's the way you go. I think that's the way you do it. Hey, well, we still got a few minutes. Let's get to the emails. If you want to email the show's email is notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Notsamwrestling@gmail.com. I'm just going to read, 2 or 3 of these real quick while we have time. Rocky writes in, Sam, the decision was made to keep Cody chasing Roman Reigns. Likely at least 90% of the fans are shocked and disappointed because of the buildup that Cody lost, okay? I realized in time Cody will beat Roman Reigns for the title, but my question is, when Cody does win, will it mean as much as if he won it at the world stage of WrestleMania? I think not. It's from Rocky. Look, that's the question, right? I don't think it's a given that Cody's going to beat Roman. I think it's still very possible. But I'm willing to say that Roman Reigns beat Cody Rhodes because WWE wanted Roman Reigns to still be champion. Roman Reigns did not beat Cody Rhodes so that Cody Rhodes could beat him later. Roman Reigns beat Cody Rhodes because WWE wanted Roman Reigns to still be champion. There are more Roman Reigns as champion stories to be told, and more Cody Rhodes not being the champion stories to be told. Will it mean as much? It all depends on the story. That's all wrestling is. It has to, if you're doing it correctly. And all that's going to be is about the story. It's why you wouldn't have the match at WrestleMania Backlash. You wouldn't even have, I mean, SummerSlam still feels very soon. Because what you want is you want a different Cody Rhodes and a different Roman Reigns fighting each other next time. So that it's not just a rematch. It's Cody is in a completely different place and so is Roman Reigns. And if that's the case, then I think you would have to ask me then if it means as much then as it would have last weekend. Let's go to Mike, okay? Mike, hey, Sam, love the show. Now that Roman has retained over Cody, do you see Rollins getting back into the mix by WrestleMania 40? Though it was by DQ, Rollins is the only one to beat Roman during his title run. Rollins pinned Roman to win his first title at WrestleMania 31 and also took the title from Roman at Money in the Bank 2016. That's very, very true. In my soliloquy not too long ago about Rollins being truly the next top WWE guy, yeah, to win the WWE Championships twice, he beat Roman Reigns both times. To win the Universal Championship twice, he beat Brock Lesnar both times. Rollins obviously has recent history with Cody Rhodes, losing to him 3 times last year. Perhaps once Cody is done slaying the beast Brock Lesnar, I'm hoping Rollins enters the title scene. Day 1 triple threat main event, Rhodes, Rollins, and Reigns. Reigns could lose the belt without being pinned, could lead to an interesting storyline for Royal Rumble and WrestleMania season. Look, I think if it is the beginning of April and you're asking me questions about what the main event of Day 1 and Royal Rumble is going to look like in 2024, we've put the cart so far ahead of the horse that the horse is going to be exhausted by the time he catches up to it. I don't even like the fact that people are trying to predict, oh, this means because SummerSlam. We have no idea. Think about what I just spelled out for you. Think about what this world looks like just in the next couple of months. Think about the fact that in less than a month, we're going to get Backlash, and then theoretically right after that, we're going to get a draft. Then we're getting King of the Ring. Then we're getting Money in the Bank. Only then will we get to SummerSlam. Who knows what NXT call-ups will be there by then? Who knows who else will have returned by then? Who knows how Riddle fits into any of this? Who knows any of this stuff? Do I think that Rollins should be getting back into the WWE title scene? Abso-freaking-lutely. But look, if you ask me, I would have Triple H draft Rome or whoever, I don't know who's going to represent the brands. Wouldn't be bad, I think, if you had an Adam Pearce type person on SmackDown and separated the brands that way. If you're going to draft people, have 2 authority figures. But I think Roman gets drafted to one brand or another. I think SmackDown is probably the way to go. Separate the titles, put the title on the line at King of the Ring, and have Seth Rollins win the King of the Ring tournament in, the end of May or beginning of June, whenever that thing is. And then after he's done with Brock, Cody could chase Seth for the WWE Championship, theoretically. If you did that, it may be tough to do that without turning Cody heel, to tell you the truth. But, yeah, I could easily advocate for having the WWE Championship on the line at the King of the Ring and having Seth Rollins win it there. But, 100%. Seth has been the one person that's been protected against Roman Reigns. Roman's never beaten Seth. Even this whole bloodline story, Roman never beat Seth. Seth is the top guy. 100%. Seth will be back in the title picture, and I think Seth will be champion. They're singing his music for a reason. They believe in him. But if you want me to start fantasy booking a triple threat for Day 1, dude, we're 8 months away. Let's see where things go first. I don't even think that WWE is talking about Day 1. You think a podcast about it is going to talk about Day 1? For God's sake. Shiamo, what's the most disappointing and heartbreaking WrestleMania ending ever? Stone Cold Steve Austin turns heel at the Reliant Astrodome, or Roman Reigns over Cody Rhodes at SoFi Stadium? Well, WrestleMania ending, it's important that you classify it that way because obviously Brock beating Undertaker would be on that list, but that wasn't the ending. So let's go through these endings, right? That are really heartbreaking. There's not that many of them. Usually the good guy wins at WrestleMania, right? You know, Hogan, 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 Hogan. Although you could argue that Hogan at WrestleMania 9 was heartbreaking. Brett, Lawrence Taylor, he was still a good guy. I guess it wasn't heartbreaking. Shawn, Undertaker, Stone Cold, Hunter, Stone Cold, Hunter as a good guy. Now we're up to 19 already, which was, what was that, Brock? 20, we're not going to mention. It wasn't heartbreaking at the time. It grew to be heartbreaking. Look, I think Roman beating Cody was more heartbreaking from a narrative perspective. And Stone Cold turning heel was more heartbreaking from the perspective that you didn't want to see it. I think when your favorite wrestler loses, it's heartbreaking in the right way. When your favorite wrestler does a thing that is so out of character that you go, I don't even know if I want to follow this guy anymore. That's a different kind of heartbreaking and not a good kind of heartbreaking. So I guess Roman Reigns beating Cody is among the most heartbreaking WrestleManias. I mean, I'm trying to think. 21, 22, 23. No. You know, you could argue. For me, the most heartbreaking ending to a WrestleMania was WrestleMania 27. The idea that The Rock would just come out as somebody that wasn't even wrestling and bury both The Miz and John Cena. That John Cena would not beat The Miz, and that The Rock would bury John Cena and The Miz combined. And that WrestleMania 27 would end with The Rock holding his arm up in the air. That was the most heartbreaking WrestleMania of all time. Yeah, 27. 27 was more heartbreaking for me than 17 or 39. That's where we'll leave it today. I appreciate you guys for being a part of the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts or here on the YouTube channel if that's where you're listening or watching. If you want more podcasts, go to patreon.com/NotSamWrestling. We do bonus stuff and everything. And yeah, see you next week.